Welcome to the regular meeting of the Audit Committee for June 2nd, 2025. I am Elliot Payne, and I'm the chair of this committee. I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll so that we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Committee Member Chuktai.
Present.
Hosbein is absent. Omar is absent. Thompson.
Here.
Williams is absent. Vice Chair Singleton.
Here.
Chair Payne.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Colleagues, our agenda is before us. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed say nay. That carries and the agenda is adopted. Next, we have the acceptance of minutes from our February 24th meeting. May I have that motion?
I'll move the minutes of February 24th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. That carries and the February 24th minutes are accepted. We have 5 items in new business today. We'll begin with item 3, which is an update report from the police department on actions related to recommendations from the 2023 property and evidence audit and 2023 sexual assault examination kit special project follow-up audit. I'll note for my colleagues and for members of the public that we will begin this discussion in closed session, but there will be a portion of the presentation that is given in the open session. So before we go to that open session, I will move to close the meeting, and I'll recognize the city attorney to provide the legal basis for the requested closed session. Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Under Section 13D.05 of the Open Meeting Law, meetings may be closed to receive security briefings and reports, to discuss issues related to security systems, to discuss emergency response procedures, and to discuss security deficiencies in or recommendations regarding public services, infrastructure, and facilities, if the disclosure of that information would pose a danger to public safety or compromise security procedures or responses. Staff has determined that the information contained in the closed session items would potentially compromise security proceedings. Therefore, it would be appropriate to close the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. With that, I move that our public meeting be closed as authorized under the provisions of the Open Meeting Law as stated by the City Attorney. May I have a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. That carries, and we will now close the public portion of our meeting and convene in closed session. For the viewing public, I will note that the broadcast of this meeting will continue, and the Audit Committee will reconvene in public after we've concluded the closed session. Thank you. We are ready. The time is now 10:27, and the Audit Committee has reconvened in open session following our closed session. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll to verify a quorum.
Committee Member Chuktai.
Present.
Hosbein.
Present.
Thompson.
Present.
Vice Chair Singleton.
Present.
Chair Payne.
Present.
There are 5 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum, and as I mentioned prior to our closed session, there will be a public presentation on this topic, and I'll invite Kirsten Hemmerberg, the manager of the Property and Evidence Unit, to begin that presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, council members and audit committee members. Appreciate being invited. I'm going to talk about I want to make sure that I'm heard. I want to talk about the Property and Evidence Unit and the SACI audit updates for everyone's benefit. This is our basic agenda: introduction, audit issues, issue updates, and then a time for questions. Our high-risk issues that have been pointed out in the audit that was done in 2023, a few of them have been resolved, so I'm just going to update you on those open issues or the ones that are nearing closure. Issue number 3, cash handling. The finding was that there were inadequate security measures when cash was transported for deposit to the bank. The Property and Evidence Unit staff were hand-delivering cash deposits to the city's collection site without security. Our update is that this issue has been resolved, and we are using a security courier who routinely stops by the Property and Evidence warehouse to pick up any cash that is there for deposit to transfer that into the city collection site. Issue number 4, warehouse maintenance. The audit division noted the facility needed several significant maintenance fixes. Specific issues identified included a new roof, parking lot repairs, pallet racking installation, cracks in the warehouse floor, and the garage door repairs. The parking lots were replaced in the fall of 2023. The pallet racking was installed in December of 2023. 2 garage doors were replaced in the spring of 2024. Larger cracks in the warehouse floor have been sealed. High-density shelving was installed in the winter of 2024. A new roof. This item is called out in the settlement agreement. Property Services indicated that it will possibly be replaced in 2026. Issue number 5, items checked out. The finding was that there are not consistent regular reviews of items checked out of the Property and Evidence Unit. The Audit Division noted that there are thousands of items checked out of the Property and Evidence Unit, that there is no consistent review of items checked out, and there is no process in place to ensure other agencies return the items. Expected return date field is now being completed in it's the Police Information Management System, PIMS is the acronym, by the evidence technicians upon checking items out of custody. A regular report is run querying all items checked out. Items are reviewed and notifications are sent if the item is past the expiration date. We're using technology to help us. Issue number 6 is the evidence continuity. The finding is that the evidence continuity field is not always logged by officers in the PIMS system. The Audit Division noted that officers are not always entering the first field in the evidence continuity as expected. They also noted that for items that have internal storage space, such as backpacks and jackets, officers are not always completing the evidence continuity for individual items located inside these backpacks and jackets or other containers. The update is that signs have been placed next to all PIMS computers and precincts and Property and Evidence Unit reminding officers to enter their evidence continuity. Signs were designed specifically for each facility and indicated the exact location officers should utilize to start the continuity. A short training video will be produced to help retrain officers and investigators on this topic. The moderate risk issues, issue number 7, PIMS data entry. The Audit Division noted that there is no standard of entry of evidence locations when officers enter items into PIMS. They also noted that there was no standardization for evidence descriptions. The update is that the property warehouse, precinct lockers, and the public service building currently have signage indicating the evidence continuity location information. Example, precinct 5 lockers or property and evidence locker number specifically, or PSB lockers. When training new sworn staff, the cadets, the recruits, the lateral officers, property and evidence unit staff train on the importance of utilizing a specific location for evidence continuity in the PIM system. A short training video is also going to be produced to help retrain officers and investigators on this topic. Issue number 8, safekeeping item disposition. The finding was that PIMS records for items stored in safekeeping storage are not always updated when items are disposed of or moved. And the Audit Division noted that safekeeping items are not always updated correctly when they're disposed of or moved. This is likely due to staff processing large quantities of items quickly. This topic is listed as resolved. It has been addressed with Property and Evidence Unit staff, and an emphasis has been placed on the attention to detail and quality assurance. Property and Evidence Management have instituted a monthly review of safekeeping items. Issue number 9, conflicts of interest. The finding is that there is not specific policy and procedure related to conflicts of interest and the handling of property and evidence. The Audit Division noted that while City and MPD have policies surrounding conflict of interest, the Property and Evidence Unit does not have specific language surrounding conflict of interest in handling property or evidence. The update here is that the Police Department will be adding a quality administrator position to the Property and Evidence Unit. This position will be tasked with writing the quality system manual, which will include topics such as impartiality, confidentiality, and conflict of interest. Ethics training was implemented for the unit in 2024 and will occur annually moving forward, and this is on top of the city's ethics training that's provided to all city employees. Issue number 10. Pardon me. Continuity plan. The finding was that there are not detailed and documented plans such as disaster recovery and continuity of operations for the Property and Evidence Unit and its processes that can be utilized in the event of disruption. The Audit Division noted that although MPD has established continuity of operations plans for the department, these plans do not specifically address the Property and Evidence Unit. The update on this is that this issue is resolved. A Property and Evidence Unit disaster plan has been created, shared with all Property and Evidence Unit staff, and provided to MPD executive staff. Issue number 11, destruction process. There are not documented procedures for off-site destruction processes. The Audit Division noted that there were no documented procedures for the off-site destruction of items such as drugs and firearms. Procedures for the destruction of firearms and drugs have been in place for decades. However, they were not clearly documented. The update is that drug destroy and gun review procedures have been written. They are in the review process and will be added to the standard operating procedures upon completion of the review. Thank you very much, and on behalf of my supervisor director Shannon Johnson, my shift supervisors Sam Daly and William Vincent, and also thanks to the audit committee, we appreciate the time that we can report today. And I'm open to questions if you have them.
Thank you for that presentation. Is there any questions for the public portion? Member Hosbin.
I'm not on. Thank you, Chair Payne. I had a quick question, and thank you for all this information. And I will preface my question by I always ask about bandwidth of tight city department, so I understand that that's part of this question. Under issue 9, you mentioned bringing in a quality administrator position.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any capacity there to do any internal departmental spot checking? A lot of these resolutions and kind of solutions are very proactive, which is amazing. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of coaching or spot checking or sampling on the back end. Is there capacity within that new position to do a quick check on the other 11 issues?
Thank you very much for your question. The idea behind the quality assurance position that we are waiting to hire for is that that person will be in charge of doing those spot checking
perfect.
pieces, as well as making sure that quality is being maintained. They will also be handling updates and reviews of our standard operating procedures, our packaging manual, and any other policy updates that need to happen within the department for property and evidence specifically. So it is very similar to the position that is already existing in the forensics division crime lab. They have a quality assurance person, and that person is handling those types of things. And we are falling under the forensics services division. The director felt it most prudent to have this position that would oversee property and evidence in that same way. So yes, it would be a true quality assurance and spot audit checking position.
Perfect. So what I'm hearing is that even though it's listed under issue number 9, it will be more all-encompassing to the general quality checks of all these processes.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Thank you.
Member Thompson?
Thank you so much, Chair Payne. I just have 2, I think, quick questions. One, it came to my mind as you were talking about procuring evidence and securely handling it. Where does the evidence currently go for the third precinct? Where's the physical location for that, since they don't have a permanent, is that the one downtown?
Thank you very much for the question. Let me just clarify for everyone's knowledge. The city has 5 precincts, and each of those precincts have temporary evidence lockers where they can put things. We make regular runs to those areas to collect that evidence. All of that evidence is stored in a centralized facility, which is our property and evidence warehouse. So third precinct's evidence comes to our property warehouse.
So, sorry, now you have a new question for me. I'm sorry. So how many of these do we have around the city?
We have one property and evidence warehouse.
And then I'm using the wrong term, but Dropbox or something?
Each precinct has secure evidence lockers that are temporary.
Okay.
And so we have 5 of those around the city.
Are they located at the
precincts?
precinct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And just for clarification, the thirds is currently housed downtown?
That is correct.
Okay. I just wanted to understand, literally the lay of the land. Thank you.
Yes.
My second question, which was more of, and I don't want to be fishing, but it says that findings, we don't have policies, procedures, with conflict of interest. What kind of a conflict of interest would arise with handling property, or, for handling evidence and property?
Thank you for the question. There are potentially conflicts of interest because a number of the staff have been city residents or are currently city residents, myself included, and crime that occurs in the city of Minneapolis has the ability to have a far-reaching effect. And there are times when we recognize names of people that we might know or might have contact with. And so the ability to separate our personal from our professional life is a part of the conflict of interest. And if a person on the staff recognizes the name of a crime victim or someone who's been suspected in committing a crime, it's up to them to report that to their supervisor so that we can make sure that they are not having undue access to the evidence or property that's brought in related to those crimes. So that would be an example of the conflict of interest in property and evidence that we have had happen.
Thank you for that. That
Yes.
really helps me understand. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Vice Chair Singleton?
Thank you for all the work you've done on this. So I had a question about evidence continuity and the new signage and upcoming training video. I know that you haven't hired the new QA position yet, but do you have a sense of whether that new signage is helping with properly filling out the fields?
I would like to optimistically say yes, and at the same time, we have more than 550 officers, and to have each one of them be perfect in that is not possible. So it is better. However, we are still trying to look at different ways that we can make improvements. One of the ways we've discussed is creating a barcode that would be placed at each of the computers that would be specific to that location. So the officers would be able to use a handheld scanner, scan the barcode, which would pre-fill the information, which would lead to more accuracy. Now, again, getting humans to follow those steps is also difficult. At the same time, we're optimistic that we'll make improvements in that area.
Thank you. And that anticipated my next question, which was whether there are more technology-focused efforts that could augment the new signage and reminders.
I wish that our computer system were able to be more customized to our department needs, but because it is a company that works with law enforcement agencies across the country, there is some generalization to the process, and we only have so much that we can make specific to our needs. Thank you.
Member Hosbein.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I did want to just, for the record, from issues 1 and 2, just ask about budget prioritization and advocacy or otherwise that's maybe needed there from a community aspect in terms of, I guess, 1 or 2 or any of these issues. And I know that's something that is maybe not a today answer issue, but I would just want to understand what that process looks like and if there's these high-risk areas that are getting the appropriate budgetary resources to be solved.
So issue 1 was about climate control. There is a budgetary issue with all of the things that we have because nothing, unfortunately, is done for free. We do want climate, we need to have climate control as a priority, and yes, we need advocates, not only from the council and from other city departments, but also from the police department, to advocate for us to get those things taken care of. This has been an issue that we have brought up in the past. In fact, we've been in this building for 5 years, and this issue's been brought up for the past 5 years. There is a financial cost to it. Thank you. Issue number 2. I also just want to be mindful about what I'm allowed to say publicly.
I appreciate that, yeah.
All right. And that was with the SACI grant. Apologize for my flipping through my presentation here.
And while you're looking for that, I'm happy with, I'm happy for other members to comment with the response for the just general, yes, advocacy is needed, and just having that recorded is fine for this, I think, open session for me too. But any other comments or questions for the committee?
And as I know that you understand, the department is under Department of Human Resources. We're under the MDHR decree, and part of that is that we are having to budget money for different activities and different things that the department needs. Again, these items are a priority for me because I'm in this environment every day. And the department also needs to prioritize these things because we could suffer from power outages, we could suffer from natural disasters that would cause us to lose power in the building, and we want to make sure that we have everything in place necessary to handle those things, as well as ongoing climate control for the whole facility.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerks to receive and file that report. Thank you, Ms. Hammerberg.
Thank you very much for your time.
Next, we have item number 4, which is receiving and filing an advisory services report on the review of health department contracts and contracting processes with Helix Health and Housing Services. I will invite Travis Kam, Community Safety Auditor, to give that report. Welcome.
All right, good morning, Chair Payne, members of the Audit Committee. Thank you for having me today. Be presenting on a review that we did. Before we begin, I just want to recognize and kind of thank management for being here. So we have management from our health department and finance here, as well as questions, I think, or comment at the end from Deputy Chief City Operations Officer Brett Jelly. So if there's any questions about the actual content or in terms of the contract and process and some of that, someone might be able to kind of step in on there. I can answer about what we saw and some of the work that we did. So before we begin, kind of, as you have had the report now for some time, I'm just kind of going to do kind of a quick pass through today. So kind of talk about back on the contract details, so a bit more about the purpose of the review and approach. I'm getting into kind of the invoices and payments, so kind of the bulk of kind of what we did in terms of looking for and kind of recognizing things that we observed there. And then we kind of get into areas for improvement and recommendations, and then kind of a quick comment on future steps. So before we kind of get too far into it, just kind of want to recognize that, this review focused on a particular contract within the health department, but a lot of these lessons, as we kind of state throughout the report and kind of we get into specifics, can be applied elsewhere across the enterprise and kind of for, it's not just kind of one department specific. And then also kind of something that, we heard throughout this process and review, and that we recognize is that this contract and the circumstances were unique in that, at the time there's a sense of urgency in the city doing the work, and the contract and nature of work and services were, unique for the health department in some aspects of terms of what there was provided and some of the way that the work was conducted. So, So kind of, what we did, so it wasn't an audit, it wasn't kind of it was more of an advisory services. So basically we were engaged to conduct a limited contract review and contracting process assessment. So we just focused on this particular contract and the processes that kind of were attached to it. And then, our analysis consisted of a review of the cities and departments' contracting and contract management processes, supporting documentation, invoices, reports, and other information that was received and that the city utilized as part of this contract in terms of invoices and payments. And then we assessed and commented on risk associated with the existing internal controls and oversight mechanisms in place and how they contributed to what we saw throughout our review. So just a quick overcap of the objectives again. So to determine the contracting process this contract went through, review the invoices and supporting documentation the city received, and then comment on internal control or process deficiencies and make recommendations for management. So kind of what specifically we're talking about today. So at the end of 2023, the health department entered into a contract with Helix LLC, doing business as Helix Health and Services for the purposes of review, shortened to Helix, or the vendor or contractor. The contract purpose was for Helix to provide temporary housing, substance use disorder treatment, and mental health services for individuals experiencing homelessness. So at the end of 2023, the city determined an urgent need for this contract and service. So the work was to include general housing case management, mental health case management therapy, community health worker services, screening, brief intervention, and referral treatment, and on-site low-intensity substance use treatment. At the time when the initial proposal was indicated and kind of things popped up, there was about a budget about $465,000, but, by the time the contract was signed at the end of November 2023, the contract was for $999,650. So at the, throughout October and November 2023, Health Department and the contractor worked to draft the contract and budget. There's a determined, based on the need for the work, is determined to go through a single source process, so not a competitive bidding process. And then it ended up going to council for approval in November 2023 as part of that process. So here's just kind of some information on what was on the RCA. The action part of the RCA was authorizing, the contract. At the time, it was kind of adjusted shortly before the meeting began to provide, as I said, the treatment services. What we saw and kind of, we noted through more context is that, Health Department and others worked quickly, in the last couple of weeks in November 2023 to finalize the contract. The contract was signed by the parties on November 30th, 2023. There's a first invoice that we'll kind of reference, was paid on December 1st, 2023. Then also something that we know as part of this process was the request for affirmative action approval was submitted at the end of November 2023. Per discussion with Procurement and Civil Rights, it should have occurred prior to the contract going through the council process for approval. So the contract was effective from December 1st, 2023 through November 30th, 2024. Again, just kind of that contract type was that professional services, single source contract, so it did not go through competitive bidding process. Of that, amount, some of it went to startup costs, about half of it went to staffing costs, and then some other categories were contractors, operating costs, housing expenses, and then administrative costs that were, made up that total contract budget. As in the report and kind of on here, just kind of some, what some of the work plans were. So there was some information in the exhibits and in the work plan about kind of what they would do in terms of, that provide that temporary housing for individuals experiencing addiction and homelessness. There was some, I think, as part of the city's process for every contract going through a single or sole source contract process, there's a justification form that was submitted. So the full text is kind of within the report that you have of kind of what it was, but kind of noting that, that need to kind of provide the services and kind of a little bit what it would contain. So now kind of getting to the bulk of the review and kind of where we spend our time in kind of noticing or reviewing contract invoices and payments and other supporting documentation. So, when we were first engaged, we reviewed the contract, met with management to understand the contract and contract management process. We then, requested invoices that had been submitted as part of this contract, requested supporting documentation, other information that was available for that. Reviewed and tried to reconcile those invoices and supporting documentation to see what information was there, kind of how things matched up. And then, as needed, inquired with the Health Department on additional documentation, clarifications, and others. So we also appreciate the work of finance and kind of procurement and accounts payable and others throughout our work in terms of giving us information and documentation, kind of answering our questions. So, as of mid-March 2025, the city had paid out about $933,000. With a final payment that occurred in early April as we were kind of wrapping up drafting this report and other stuff, and we'll get into that a little bit, but there were some additional considerations on the advance payment invoice and then that final invoice to cover that duplicate erroneous payment that we'll get into in a second here. So in the report and kind of on here, we kind of noted a handful of areas that we kind of observed and wanted to kind of draw attention to, or kind of that we know through a review. So one is around duplicate erroneous payments, review of invoices and supporting documentation prior to payment, completeness and clarity of expenses to the supporting documentation, prepaid expenses and pre-contract expenses, allowable, unallowable expenses, detailed and clear, consistent cost categories and breakdowns, and then advance payment, and then subcontractor approval. So the first kind of category here, duplicate erroneous payments. So two invoices totaling $177,000, $462.92 were identified to have been paid in error, with the vendor submitting revised invoices for those time periods that were also paid. So as we noted, when we were doing the review, we noted that there was two invoices that covered 2 months, 2 other invoice periods, so the same time periods, they're for different amounts. We inquired with management, about those overlapping service periods and kind of the amount, the differences in those. Management then determined that 2 of those invoices should not have been paid as part of this contract, and thus were duplicate or erroneous payments, adding up to that $177,000. So the city notified the vendor of these payments, and worked to, the vendor opted to submit invoice and supporting documentation for unreimbursed eligible expenses that were also on the time period. So as we kind of detail in the report a little bit, so it kind of followed there was some time period on the contract and services from basically kind of summer and fall 2024 that were the vendor submitted and the health department reviewed and approved for that tie that payment to. So the city never paid more than that $999,000. It's just that there was 2 invoices that, that went to that contract amount that should not have been paid, and then were just kind of noted back. So review of invoice and supporting documentation prior to payment. So, we required about invoices and payments that, covered, there you go. The city that formally reviewed and reconciled supporting documentation with invoices to ensure information was complete and accurate with requested reimbursement costs. So as part of a review, we requested the documentation, reviewed the invoices. As reviewing, we know that, some documentation either was not, in the original batch of documents that we received and had to be requested. We also noted that, those questions on transaction reports and some other that did not fully align with invoices were missing, and there was unclear supporting documentation at times in terms of what costs were applied to where and how they were applied. As part of that, we noted that there did not appear to be a detailed documented review and reconciliation of invoices and supporting documentation. As a result, we're unable to confirm, the information I received prior to the invoices and kind of how that contributed to, or how that matched to the payments that were made. That as we kind of received kind of throughout, kind of led to some limitations, in terms of reviewing kind of the reconciling documents and information, and required additional time and work on us and to determine how things what was received, how things matched up. And those also, resulted in a lack of clarity and confusion among stakeholders in terms of discussing and kind of reviewing the documentation. Also just note that, the consequence of that kind of played into the overpayments as well as, that wasn't, the invoices weren't reconciled to catch that there was those, duplicate periods or those periods that did not have supporting documentation attached. And that's there we go. Our next category, so completeness and clarity of expenses supporting documentation. So supporting documentation submitted with invoices were not always accurate, complete, accurate, and clear, with variances in documentation and reimbursement requests and a need for additional documentation information. So playing into what I said in terms of having to request additional information and clarity, we noted, at the end, the requested documentation was ultimately able to be received, but we noted, at the time, unable to locate a number of supporting documents that we had to be requested. There was inconsistencies in amounts and numbers between the invoices, transaction reports, and supporting documentation. So as we detail in the report a little bit around some of the cost categories or the transaction report that detailed what the expenses were for the period, then there was supporting documentation, and at times, none of those matched up with the invoice, so it's determining what expenses were applied to where and how they were applied to. As there were some breakdowns and calculations were not fully clear, requiring additional inquiry. So, when it comes to staffing and some of those other costs, we had to spend additional time and work trying to determine where the costs were applied to and how they were applied. For each of the contract cost categories, the vendor, as I said, generally provided that transaction and cost report, including line item expenses or amounts and the date, as well as the total amount charged for that particular cost for that time period. So there's a couple that we had to request in there, but when we tried to match those up with supporting documentation, that's where we noted that there's the variances, discrepancies, and some additional work there. In the report, we detail some specific areas of note when it comes to each of those the bullet points on here. So around transaction cost reports, around some of them not adding up with the invoice. So it's determining, generally, the invoice was less than the transaction report, so the city was paying less than that total, that total amount, but unable to, fully determine what portion of cost went to where. As well as some missing staffing costs. We noted difficulty in reviewing and reconciling due to the way that the 401k payments and some other expenses were applied to, and how they played into those costs, as well as, some of the documentation. It appeared, between the initial invoice, initial documentation that was received when the contract was, with the invoice to kind of some of the documentation that's provided on the back end, there was some variances in people's positions and staffing and salaries that kind of made it hard to kind of determine what is the source of truth, the one, that was submitted originally, or kind of some of these documents at the back end in terms of trying to reconcile that we, unable to know, because different positions, people missing, or kind of people changing on that one. We also noted, I was outlined in the report a little bit around one of the payroll in processing fees that appear to have been paid, used kind of twice. And then again, around that, some of those fees, like how they were determined, like what we were paying for, if it was, consistency around those applications and kind of those amounts. Around contractors, we kind of noted quite a few instances on contractors, as we kind of get into a little bit. There ended up being 3 subcontractors, which is why we say cities, for purposes, the city is the helix is a contract with the city, and then, there's, for the city's purposes, there's kind of the subcontractors that contract with helix, and then ended up being $80,000 for those use of those contractors. And we kind of noted observations around, those 3 around, the billing of those and kind of the details around what they were billing for and those hours. We kind of got detail in the report a little around, the specifics that, were noted. So kind of a lack of clarity, for some of these costs, like around, the bulk of the money went to, encampment paperwork, inspections, moves, doesn't really, doesn't really kind of provide that clarity to, that detail into what the city was covering and paying for. Operating costs, so had to kind of request and receive some initial documentation that was missing around those, and we have a separate note around operating costs, and then kind of housing and admin costs, noting too those clearly around breakdowns of expenses. Some of those documentation that we had to request and receive after the fact. Prepaid expenses and pre-contract expenses, so the city paid for expenses that occurred prior to the contract start date, and prepaid expenses, such as enterprise software for months when the vendor was not directly performing contract work. So kind of 2 parts of this. So kind of first part is, reviewing the invoices, reviewing the supporting documentation. The city appeared to pay for expenses that occurred prior to the contract start date. Through discussions with a city attorney's office, procurement, it is kind of, if you do need to kind of, if there is circumstances, is recommended kind of predate the contract start date or kind of do some notations on there there. But we noted kind of in the report a little bit, some specifics around, what we kind of observed in some of the expenses that appear to have occurred before the contract start date, such as, the job posting and recruiting, QuickBooks setup, and some of that other work. And then, as noted, kind of with those, some difficulty too is that the transaction reports may not fully align with the invoices. So maybe the city might have paid for a prorated portion, but it was hard to tell based on what we had, what expenses were applied to there. And also we kind of noted the city, examples appear to prepay for 12 months of use of the items. So such as software, Microsoft 365 accounts, corporate mailbox, and some of the other expenses. So at the end of the day of the contract, with the the overpayment that was made, and within the prepayment, the advance payment, the contract ended up billing for work through November 30th, 2024, but originally, work was kind of stopping, based on the invoices kind of in summer of 2024 that was billing for the city. So, it's best practice for the city to bill, if you are using a service, bill for that month, bill for that period, instead of prepaying, for a full 12 months when it was not clear, whether the city using it for 12 months or not for that work. Unallowable expenses, so again, kind of some lack of clarity around those. So unallowable expenses as part of this contract were not clear, with the city covering startup costs and various organizational expenses, including printers, enterprise software, and insurance. So, based on what we had information, there was a contract and the exhibits that kind of provided some breakdown of costs, but the city did not identify or kind of clearly articulate what was allowed and unallowed as part of this contract, in terms of, organizational expenses, in terms of contract expenses. There was, as we kind of noted with the enterprise software, within some of these use of printers and kind of scanners, the city generally does not allow those purchases, because of operational expenses, and it's kind of best practice or the city's been generally prefers to, not kind of cover those kind of expenses that were paid for. But as part of the contract, it didn't really clearly articulate, the city would pay for this, or this is what the city is specifically paying for, just kind of within the cost categories and, some of those larger lump sums. And again, when it comes to some of those organizational expenses, what the city would cover and kind of what they were not, do not clearly articulate or kind of define those information. Detailed and clear, consistent cost breakdown and cost categories. So some cost categories are not broken down into specifics with a clear understanding of how they were determined, and expenses for some cost categories were inconsistently applied. For example, we noted mileage kind of appeared in different cost categories throughout the documentation. So kind of what I was going to a little bit at the end of last one is that, along with the lack of clarity on the cost in terms of like how the costs were determined and some of those calculations. So, it wasn't clear how the amounts were calculated for this contract, if it was on a per client basis, if it was on a time basis, such as per month, or kind of, throughout the contract. You kind of looked at the exhibit and contract and tried to, wasn't really clear, like, if the city's paying for this number of people to be serviced for this time period, or just, we're paying for this time period and kind of whatever falls in that time period, and that kind of, plays into, what we noted kind of also in terms of, with new discussion, with management and kind of with others, the lack of clarity on those cost categories and kind of what they applied to. And then two, we were unable to document and define breakdown these expected costs. So, contract ended up using the whole budget, but, in terms of if we were paying for, as I said, kind of what we were specifically paying for, if it was expected to pay the whole contract amount, if it was just kind of that calculation, the city paid and kind of covered various expenses. The advance payment, so this contract contained a $238,000 advance payment that did not clearly identify the expenses that will be applied to, creating challenges in reviews and reconciliation. So there was that initial payment that was made on December 1st, 2023 that, covered $238,000 of some information that it went to startup costs, which, includes initial staffing and operating costs, accounting for 15% of proposed budget was the information. Some of it went to contractors, and then some of it went to admin costs. We did note that contractors, were kind of paid on a monthly basis, reviewing the invoices and supporting documentation, based on when they submitted work. But it was not clearly detailed to, when those expenses would be applied to. So the contractor ended up ultimately submitting, applying it to kind of summer of 2024 expenses. But in our discussions, it wasn't, at the time when we first began this and kind of throughout, it wasn't, there was the contract and the language are not clear to state, we'd cover this work in this time period, this month, or we cover this month. It was kind of left to the vendor and kind of the city, this city to kind of vendor and kind of, to kind of submit stuff, and the city kind of to approve those calculations and amounts. And that, as a result, it kind of hindered our ability to reconcile expenses supporting documentation, because that documentation was received, in the back end of the contract on the work. Subcontractor approval, so the city did not receive and formally approve in writing the use of 3 subcontractors. We noted that, when reviewing the subcontractor information, that there was, based on the ones that were submitted, there ended up being 3 of them. There's 2 identified in the contract, and there's a specific contract term in the contract on subcontracting, and that the city must receive and formally approve in writing kind of the use of another, receive the use of subcontractors. And we know that there's 2 in the original budget, and there was kind of that 3rd one that was also used. And also they did not, in the supporting documentation, did not kind of identify which one was going to be the contract project consultant and which one was the principal consultant. There was just kind of different language that was used around there. So kind of, the bulk of this and kind of what it led to is kind of, areas for improvement and recommendations. So we kind of, reviewing what we received, reviewing what we noted, kind of, try to identify areas for improvement, areas for, they want kind of to highlight that we can make recommendations on to. So I'll kind of get to these as I kind of go throughout, but there's ended up being 5 of these. So the first one is around conflicts of interest and single source contracts. So there's a need for a city to conduct required conflict of interest reviews around single source contracts to address gaps and risk and get control gaps. So basically, for a normal contracting process, there's kind of that when an RFP is reviewed, or there's kind of that a stopping point, of kind of that check for around conflict of interest. But when it comes to these single source contracts, like this one was, There is no required declarations or other potential interest controls in the required form that's meant, supposed to be completed. It does not contain space or instructions regarding conflicts of interest and, where those steps may occur in this sort of process. As we kind of outlined in the report, it kind of goes through a unique process there. So we have recommendations on establishing a proactive conflict of interest disclosures and reviews in the single source contracting process. The city should ensure that these are collected and that they're reviewed by a body such as, procurement or kind of the PRC. Ask questions and make further inquiry if necessary, and make sure, that any potential concerns or observations are documented and maintained. Also, policy and procedure documents should be updated and reflected to kind of update these expectations. And longer term, as kind of part of that oversight and monitoring, the city should be kind of centrally tracking these contracts to identify trends and explore opportunities for additional controls and oversight over these types of contracts, as they do kind of follow unique kind of procurement practice. Advanced payment practices. So the city should clearly state when advance payments are allowed, ensure there is a clear approval process for such payments, and ensure that there's clarity in what reimbursable expenses are associated with the advance payment and how the contractor and contract manager will reconcile expenses. So as we noted, this one didn't really kind of clearly articulate in the contract those expenses, but also in terms of the process. The city generally discourages advance payments. As we kind of noted in the report, there's kind of references in some of the various documents around advance payments, such as in one of the procedures for the professional consulting services over $5,000 but $175,000, but it's not fully uniform across all documents there. That consistent direct kind of viewpoint and approach. And then, as a result, it can be challenging to match payments to those advance payments, requiring additional time and energy, such as we had to conduct in this contract to determine those out. So we recommend the city formally and clearly state its expectation on advance payments, including specifically stating what contract types and whether they might be allowed for, and under what circumstances they may be considered or utilized. So at the finance level, kind of centralize that or the process and clearly state in those documents what is the city's viewpoint, what is the stance, kind of set that expectation. Procurement should ensure that all departments are aware of the expectations and that finance is established, and that those applicable requirements are carried forward to contracts. If an advance payment is deemed necessary, the city should establish a clear approval process with stakeholders such as procurement, the city attorney's office, chief financial officer, others are clearly aware of and approve the payment with clear contract language. So having that process, if there is a need for that. Through our discussions, we kind of inquired about the advance payment that was kind of made through this one, and there was kind of some unclarity kind of around awareness of it and kind of how it kind of applied to things. So kind of clearly have that process at the procurement finance level before it gets to the contracting stage. Some other recommendations continued. So contracts clearly identify that advance payment will occur, and that contracts will attach exhibits identify the specific line items that the payment would be attached to. Prior to the final contract managers and the vendor should have that clear understanding and awareness and recognition around those advance payment and how it would be utilized, and kind of be able to formally track it. And then, again, at the finance level, kind of establish ways to kind of centrally track and monitor kind of the use of advance payments and how they're being utilized to provide oversight and monitoring of them. Contracting process. So contracts drafted by department should clearly identify allowable and unallowable expenses as part of the contract with detailed invoices and budgets. So we know if, for this contract did not clearly articulate allowable or unallowable expenses as part of the contract, and there was not specific clarity on some of the cost categories and the related expense calculations or rates. And the lack of clarity and specifics in the contracting process can carry forward into the contracting management stage, requiring more time and energy and resources to review invoices and documentation and provide that financial oversight. So more time on the back end spent determining what might be allowed and what's not allowed, or kind of how it fits into the contract if we don't really articulate at the front end, what work will be performed and what's allowed, what's not allowed. Working with contractors in the stage and setting clear expectations from the city in the contracting stage can help facilitate a more timely and smoother contracting experience for the city, also the contractor knowing, what they can expense and what they cannot expense. So we have specific recommendations here for the health department and for procurement. So, health department, part of the contract signing and as part of the contract exhibits, ensure that there are sufficient expense details to allow for adequate reconciliation and understanding of the costs, such as how items such as staffing would be utilized, and the rate calculations that we utilize to determine those expected costs. Articulate allowable and unallowable expenses are prior to the contract signing, ensuring that there's that clarity alignment with the city and the contractor. Similarly, for procurement, we recommend that they kind of set standards and clarity around allowable and unallowable expenses as part of updates to expectations and documents such as the city's financial management policy and other contracting policy and procedures. Provide documented guidance on allowable and unallowable expenses, cost calculations, and other expense details for departments and contract managers. So at the procurement level, finance level, provide more guidance, resources, kind of set those expectations around what they kind of expect in terms of being specific and being around allowable and unallowable expenses and kind of some of that contract language. And as we noted, for, this recommendations can be applied, for health department, can be applied for procurement, can be applied enterprise-wide when it comes to this. So invoice reviews, documentation, and tracking. So as we noted for this one, the health department should ensure all invoices are reconciled with supporting documentation and that all documentation has been received prior to payment with invoices and payments sufficiently tracked. So it can be, as we noted, there can be unclear and different expectations among departments and contract managers regarding responsibility of reviewing invoices and documentation. Can also be lack of clarity regarding what is sufficient and what's not sufficient. So, is a piece of paper, this piece of paper sufficient, or is this receipt sufficient to, back up those expenses? As we noted, most of city contracts are on a reimbursement basis, so the city's paying for something that, expense that had already occurred that we would be paying for. As part of this effective contract management, these reviews should tie into other oversight activities expected of contract managers, such as site visits, requesting and reviewing performance reports, and supporting information for those and other activities. So as part of, when it comes to contract management, contracting stage, there's kind of the financial management aspect of reviewing the invoices, reviewing supporting documentation prior to payment, but then there's also, other contracting management oversight, such as site visits, making sure the work is actually being performed, making sure there is, the city's receiving what it's paying for, and that, in the out and the other end there. So for the health department, we recommend that, in accordance with, oversight practices, strengthen financial oversight over contracts, ensuring that expenses are supported by that sufficient documentation. So establish a centralized way of tracking contracts, invoices, and supporting documentation, payments, and other key contract information. Ensure all contract managers are reviewing and reconciling those invoices and payments, and providing adequate financial oversight. This may require, additional work and, additional work and kind of communicate with the vendor, communicate with others for the, additional information and clarity, such as, if we don't receive we don't receive supporting documentation, if there's questions around it, but that's where it should be kind of occurring in that, kind of contract manager stage. Work with procurement in the city attorney's office, understanding what is acceptable for supporting documentation, what's not, and what information must be included on the supporting documentation. Management should work to establish methods of oversight and monitoring of contracts, such as ensuring contracts, are updating information, there is that review and reconciliation prior to payment, and that all information and reports, such as closed documents, are received prior to final payment. For procurement, similar kind of those for the health department, but kind of at the kind of a level above in terms of, setting those financial policies, setting that kind of expectation around, and it's clear for users what is required around reviewing of invoices and reconciliation, making sure that it's clear and consistent across the enterprise around what contract managers are reviewing and kind of what they are approving for documentation and payments. As part of procedure documents, kind of develop guidance and resources for contract managers on what is sufficient documentation, and communicate proactively, such as through training, through city talk, through email, through updates, making sure that, when something occurs, when there is, a need for clarity or kind of might be beneficial, kind of sending out those updates to the enterprise around, what might be acceptable, what might not be, or if there's a trend or something comes up as part of that oversight. And then also kind of communicate expectations to departments and contract managers, and continue work with the state attorney's office on implementing training. So there's been some work on training with the attorney's office and procurement around for contract managers, and kind of continuing that work, continuing that expectation, kind of finding ways to be more proactive on a regular, identifiable basis to get information out. So last kind of one quickly is just kind of expedited contracting process. So we should noted that the city should establish a clearly communicated, well-defined, documented process with approvals and clear oversight for a situation where an urgent contracting need has been determined. So this one, like others we have kind of seen in the past, there was that urgent need for services and kind of work that was performed, but when it does that, it creates pressure on the stakeholders, it creates pressure on people in the process. They may not be aware of, the need for the urgency, or, they might get something on the desk and this has to be signed or kind of sent out today, or kind of, those stuff. So, those pressures, those burdens, can create instances where contracting processes go, off track, or kind of maybe, might not have been, additional challenges and work, or kind of, as we saw for this one, where, additional work kind of spent reviewing on the back end kind of what happened. We recognize that, while there may be needs for times for the city to, quickly be able to, find a contractor, kind of do that work, and, as part of that, to kind of adjust the risk and impacts, the increased risk and impacts, we recommend the city should consider establishing clear guidelines and processes for when it is determined a contracting process is urgent and must move quickly, such as establishing kind of that group of stakeholders, similar to kind of the permanent review committee or kind of others, to kind of review the situation request, determine first if there is that need. A lot of times maybe it can be handled through existing contract or existing work, or may not be that, as urgent as the stakeholders in the moment think it is, but having that kind of oversight from kind of that finance level, that procurement level, to kind of, make that determination. And then that stakeholder group can be aligned and kind of be informed of the need from the start, reducing inefficiencies and ensuring that there is that clarity and kind of consistent communication, and that there isn't kind of, in a typical contract process, there's many people involved throughout the city, kind of, highlighting the need highlighting the need first instead of kind of after the fact. So, a group of stakeholders, such as department, procurement, city attorney's office, and others, can determine, as I said, kind of if there is that need, work with the department to make sure that the needs are clear and that, what they specifically want to need, provide that clear roles and responsibilities among groups and the stakeholders in the contracting process, ensuring that needs and objectives are aligned and that expedited contracting process is necessary, and that everyone has that same understanding. So everyone's on the same page, that everyone has the same awareness, of the same kind of dedication, that same kind of timetable to kind of get the work done. Ensure that there are clear policies and procedures for this process, or kind of for these kind of contracts, and update or provide guidance as necessary. And then also kind of providing that real-time guidance and oversight. So if there is a step that might be missed, or something that should be occurring, in real time, be able to making sure that all steps are completed and that sign-offs are completed, and then facilitate and more quickly and effectively move the contracting process along, as instead of going from stakeholder to stakeholder, kind of having that awareness and alignment from that one group. So those are kind of our recommendation, what we kind of saw throughout this contract and recommendations. As I kind of said, this wasn't unique, just for the health department, something that we've kind of noted, for the enterprise, and kind of hope to kind of carry forward the enterprise. We do have, some other ongoing work related to, procurement and kind of reviewing of kind of, as we kind of called out in the enterprise risk assessment, some of those risks that we've been tracking, kind of monitoring around those single source contracts and some of these contracting processes. So we'll continue to follow up with responsible parties as necessary and kind of, incorporate some of this into our work. And I just want to appreciate management's help and work in this. As we kind of review this information, kind of got information and kind of presented this, it was helpful to, kind of be the coordinated response and kind of make sure that we all kind of understand what kind of happened and how we can kind of, as a city, improve. I believe Brett might have some comments, or if not, also, as I said, questions on what we saw. It can be for me, also management's here from a couple of departments who might be able to answer questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Did you want to make some comments, Mr. Jelly? Come on up.
Thank you, Chair Payne and committee members. My name is Brett Jelly. I'm the Deputy City Operations Officer for Development, Health, and Livability. So on behalf of the staff team, I appreciate the opportunity to follow Mr. Cam's presentation with some brief comments. First, I want to thank the Auditor Timmerman and his team for their collaborative approach during this review. I also want to thank the Health Department, Finance and Property Services for approaching this review with the same collaboration. These are opportunities to learn what we're doing well and areas where we can make improvements. A management response is included with the audit report, and the purpose of the management response is to note changes we've put into place as this review was in process. These include improved tracking, contract tracking, additional training, and formalizing standard operating procedures. It also provides some context for the particular need at the moment in time for culturally specific housing, substance use disorder, and mental health resources for the Native American community. We have members of the staff team in the audience if there are questions from the committee, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any questions from committee members? Member Hosbein?
Thank you, Chair Payne. I did have a quick question on the manager response, and thank you for providing that in that context from both groups on future follow-up. I think I'm used to seeing kind of each of the recommendations kind of tracked with a timeline within our reports. I just want to make sure that the audit committee or the audit team feels comfortable that the manager response and the other enterprise efforts is going to meet the needs of this specific example.
Chair Payne, Committee Member Hosbein, good question. Thank you for kind of highlighting that. So yeah, this wasn't as a typical audit. We follow the audit process, and you kind of would see kind of specific recommendations and kind of management responses kind of for each one. As this was a advisory service, kind of a limited contract review, kind of followed a different process. So in terms of kind of the management responses, that they weren't formal audit issues. So there's something that we will keep track of. As I kind of outlined, we have future work and kind of ongoing work already around contracting, procurement, kind of some of these processes, and they'll be kind of incorporated into those processes as well as a risk assessment in terms of making sure that, work is being done, or if we see kind of those risks kind of being highlighted or represented again. So something that we are actively tracking and monitoring, and hope to do some specific engaged audit work, or kind of more of that structured audit where we can kind of provide that specific targeted review of a process and the internal controls versus this was that more limited, narrow scope.
Perfect, thank you for that. And I do have a couple more questions unless someone else is in queue. And then also in terms of it as being a single source contract and the duplicate payments, in your review of the kind of supplemental information that came in, was there any concerns that you saw for what should have been approved? It just, whenever there's something like this, it just feels a little icky, like it's not best practice. I don't think anyone's sitting here saying it is. And I know we were still under budget for what the contract listed, but in terms of that secondary kind of to make up to 177K, did that invoice feel robust? Did it feel like what should have been charged for?
Yeah, Committee Member, Chair Payne, Committee Member Hosbein, I think management can provide maybe a bit more specifics on that invoice. So yeah, as part of our review, it was received kind of after kind of the tail end of the work. So as for any of our work, we're reviewing what management has done, what management has conducted, and if there's that sufficient supporting documentation, sufficient documentation kind of support that work. I think we know that around the use of that kind of ties into some of that we kind of talked about around those cost categories and the cost expenses as part of this contract in terms of what the city was kind of paying for, if it was that full year or kind of that targeted services, as it wasn't clear when reviewing kind of even the other invoices kind of what was expected in terms of maxing out that staffing costs or kind of some of that stuff. So kind of kind of note that, and then kind of note that, yeah, in terms of, that final invoice payment that was reviewed and approved by management, that was kind of, as I said, at the challenge, we kind of noted that, but it wasn't part of the ones that we detailed review, as, in the table that we had as well, so, but, just kind of note that, I think everything kind of plays into, that you having to do that, and kind of note the use of those, that finding stuff after the fact, which creates more difficulty, more uncertainty, more time and resources for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and yeah, I know the comment, this feels icky, is not super helpful, so thank you for taking that one. But I think there's a reverse repayment and then submitting another true invoice. That was kind of the path chosen, and just want to comment on that. So appreciate the context. And then I think the last question, this is maybe not audit direct, but it sounds like from the contract overview that was provided and management response that this was a success. And I think with all audits, like this program seems like it was a success for 94 people. I don't know if there's a comment on, yes, this was considered a success and a sustainable path moving forward, or if there's other pieces that we should be considering as in addition to the documentation and the kind of best practices around the payment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was outside of our reviews audit, but hopefully maybe maybe management, if anyone is available, kind of could comment on what you just said.
Perfect, thank you. And Chair Payne, if I'm going out of scope, please pull me back.
Chair Payne, Committee Member Hosman, Damone Chaplin, Health Commissioner, Minneapolis Health Department. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I was just commenting in the management response, the contract seemed like it provided a service that was successful for these 94 people. And I was just curious about the department's view that this was a model that should have been used, that minus the potential other concerns on the documentation and administration, that this was a successful program and kind of money, not money well spent, because any money spent to help a single individual is always, in my mind, a good thing. But I just wanted to kind of get your view on this program generally.
Yeah, I think in general it was successful given the time and the issue that we were dealing with. We were talking about encampments, decommissioning encampments and getting folks into housing and treatment. I think the other piece of this, we noticed this particular contract, we noticed the nuance around homelessness when folks were moving in herds. And so that was one of the nuances with this particular strategy. And so, yes, we think it was successful for that particular time period, but we're also looking for other strategies.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Member Thompson.
Thank you so much, Chair Payne. I just have, and I don't know who would answer this. Well, if you're up here, thank you. I will ask my second question, which is simply, is the Department of Health, is this normal to subcontract these kind of services, or is this something that would be taken care of, dare I say, like in-house, if it was maybe a smaller issue? How does that work in terms of these subcontracts, and do we have more than just this one out there?
Well, I'll speak in general. Chair
Maybe
Payne,
use the right term. This sole, what is it called? The
single source?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Chair Payne, Committee Member Thompson. I'll speak in general terms. If you have more specifics, I have staff that can help. In general, we don't do single source. In this particular case, because of the situation we did, it's an avenue that's available to us as city members and departments. We were focusing on Native American communities and folks that were in encampments and also had substance abuse issues as well. So in that particular situation, this, in my opinion, it was very close to where it would fit the category for a single source. In addition, again, as I mentioned before, the nuance for this particular one is that we had information and we realized that folks were moving in herds. They were moving in groups of folks together, and that was kind of the difference with this particular one.
That makes sense to me. Thank you. I don't need to ask my other question. Thank you.
Vice Chair Singleton.
Thank you. And I think this is more on the contracting side, so maybe a question for Mr. Com. Thank you, Chair Payne. But, and let me know if this is better held for our next agenda item, but I'm wondering if in reviewing this particular contract and with your general awareness of other contracting and procurement procedures across the city, if you've seen examples of of contracts that, like if the city has done a good job in other situations of clearly stating what acceptable or allowable and disallowable expenses are, of like clearly stating documentation expectations that could be used and deployed throughout the enterprise.
Chair Payne, Committee Member Singleton, good question. I think around that, I don't want to call out, specific departments at the time, but I would say we are doing work right now with kind of some ones that might be some good examples, and hoping kind of presenting them in the future of kind of what, might be working well, kind of some of those models, and as they kind of apply, for kind of an audit plan, we have a couple of kind of contracting ones with some departments that we actively engage in. I just want to, at the moment, kind of, as we haven't finished our testing, haven't finished our review, but I think that's something that we actively look for as audit, and especially now through our discussions, kind of through, as we kind of highlight through these, recommendations and kind of, through future work, like, what is kind of what is a good model with what are those expectations, and I think we can, in the near future, kind of be able to, kind of highlight some of those, or kind of, fully kind of provide some of those recommendations across the enterprise. I think here was, we just kind of made some general recommendations, for health department and, for the enterprise, but we haven't, completed testing on, some of the other stuff lately or that, but hope to, in the future, and I think, something that we actively look for is audit. We always focus on, a lot of times, people feel like we focus on the negatives, what's going bad, what's, might necessarily be working well, but we also, through our discussions, are always kind of seeing, what might be working well, what is, what would you like to highlight? What is something that, you found success in? So.
And then, so my question, and I want to give grace on this one because I was there kind of on the ground as all of these dynamics were unfolding in our community. And I think it's easy to highlight, high six-figure double payment, that's a big mistake. It's easy to highlight procurement or contract managers as having some sort of failing in that type of error. But I think that is downstream from how we got into this contract, and it's my understanding that this was a bit of a handshake deal with the mayor, and kind of coming back to City Hall and saying, make this happen. And I think staff did their level best to really try to be responsive to the moment. And I think that created the conditions for lots of errors, just to have it moving so quickly. And I'm wondering, in a executive mayor system where a decision is made to say, make this happen, what kind of controls are there to say, actually, this might be too risky to just make happen? Like, do we see in the management response a policy that does outline some sort of risk analysis that allows professional staff to say, hey, actually, no?
Chair Payne and audit committee members, in the next segment here, when I go over some of my early observations, I have a recommendation related to that. It is not illegal for a city council member or the city council body or for the mayor to expedite a contract like this, but it is certainly not a best practice. And so one of the recommendations that has come out of the legislative auditor's office at the state level is to not approve contracts or grants, specifically grants off of the legislative floor. And so the recommendation is to limit that, whether that's coming from the mayor himself or from the city council. And I think there needs to be some additional exploration on how that is done, because staff will need to have the documented process and policies to have the strength to stand behind that. The council has agreed that, we are not going to move forward with these types of immediate contracts. The mayor has agreed to that. And if we do, here is the process that must be followed. And so as far as getting to the specifics of how to do that, my recommendation, like I say in the next segment here, is it gets to it a little bit, but it is still general enough where audit can help from the risk identification when it comes time to develop the specifics of that policy.
Yeah, I think it would be really good for us to adopt something more formally, because I think it does put professional staff in a really tricky situation, because If there's not anything formal to lean on, then you're just kind of
Exactly.
putting your own career at risk by actually asking those types of questions.
Right, yep. And like I say, you'll see here an actual recommendation for legislation and for an ordinance.
And then a follow-up question, and I don't know if this is for you, Mr. Timmerman, or for staff, but I actually want to be an advocate for these types of innovative approaches that maybe have a higher risk profile but are more responsive to community need. But I'd like there to be more checkpoints in between making the handshake deal and paying that first invoice. Like, how do we close that feedback loop so that when we are trying to determine, is this the better way to do it versus the, continuum of care model led by the county? How do we close the feedback loop to know that this is actually a more effective method and that we should actually double down on this? Or is there an opportunity to see maybe there are some problems with these startup costs, maybe this isn't working out as we intended? Do we have controls built in to be able to cut off a contract midstream already in our current policies, or is that something that needs to be developed or even strengthened for these single source contracts? I'm not sure if there is an answer for that or not.
I think exploration's needed on how to develop the controls for that. To your question, that is pretty broad. I will say that in the second to next segment, I'm going to be talking about some resource needs by the Office of City Auditor, and the investment in those will help us look at some program evaluation where we can take ideas from council members and really dive deep into them, similar to what the Office of the Legislative Auditor does with their program evaluation division. So that is one of those topics that could end up on that list for our office to review. But certainly, as the administration is developing policy, we can act as an advisor in that role as well.
And then final question, this might be for health staff. Have we done any retrospective on this contract to do a comparison of, the counterfactual? If we took $1 million and funneled that to the county for their continuum of care services, would we have been more effective, less effective? It would be good to see kind of as much of an apples to apples comparison, because my recollection was this $1 million was supposed to be startup costs for a new model, and after that $1 million contract ended, I think the expectation was that it was a new successful model that would be self-sustaining. I'm not sure if that's what ultimately played out in this contract, and then the question is, would it have been wiser for us to partner with the county, or was this truly a great innovation that we should be celebrating?
Chair Payne, I think it was an innovative approach to a specific problem, and we do have some takeaways from this experience that we will use going forward. I think the idea of housing and supportive services is not novel, but the idea around herding was novel for us. It was something unique and different. We have collaborative opportunities with the county that we currently work on with opioids, and we're looking to strengthen those relationships with them going forward. The county has a whole set of their own priorities that they have around the continuum of care for homelessness and their response with opioids. And so we work closely with them already. And so we take lessons from the helix and we'll put them forward to our other strategies going forward. So I don't think there was whether we should have given it to them or proceeded with the initiative. I think there's lessons learned that we can take with our collaborations going forward.
Yeah, but the question is, should we appropriate another $1 million for a sole source contract with Helix because it was really effective, and we learned that through this, and it'll be a more refined process after this audit and improving our contracting procedures, or what should we learn from this?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying, that the things that we took away from this experience was that the herding works. People do move in groups. Whether or not we work specifically with Helix or not, that lesson learned and how we engage with the community, how we engage with this particular population, that will stand up, and we will see that going forward. The evaluation of whether we should be working specifically with Helix or not, that's something that we'd have to think about going forward. But we have other strategies that we are focused on now, one of those being working more closely with the county and then really mobilizing some of the strategies that we have into community.
Okay, thank you for that. Not seeing any other questions, so I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report and move to direct staff to publish the report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. That carries. And up next, item 5 is a presentation from the city auditor on preliminary observations related to city enterprise risk management and contract management and oversight. I will invite City Auditor Robert Timmerman to give that report. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Chair Payne, Audit Committee. Director Pudyal and I were talking, and we promised to get you out by 12:15. So we're going to be quick on these next few slides. So I've been in the role now for 3 months, and just to step back a little bit, I started in February, and I wanted to take the first 3 to 6 months to make observations, not to make any drastic changes, but to also make sure the work of the office continues. And in those 3 months, we have taken on a number of things. I do appreciate this opportunity. I'm going to outline some of my early observations. I am also going to outline my vision for the Office of City Auditor. I issued a few memos over the weekend. I think each of you received those via email. They will also be added to the RCA file, so they are made public with the agenda. The first one is this early observations email, and it does tie into some of the things we just talked about with the helix contract that was reviewed. I want to make clear that these observations, as well as the recommendations that I'm talking about today, do not stem from an assurance audit. They are not in response to actual audit findings, but they are in response to observations that I've made, and they are in response to conversations that I've had with the highest levels of the administration as well as the city council. And so I am confident in the priorities that I'm outlining for you today. And these are priorities for my office. These are things that you will see are also parallel that should be priorities within the administration. But these are priorities for the audit work that the city auditor and the staff do, and we take into all of our audits in the coming years. The first priority is it is clear that there is insufficient enterprise risk management and internal control structure in the city of Minneapolis. I've heard this from council members. I've heard this from members in the executive leadership team in the mayor's office. The city currently lacks a cohesive and sufficiently robust framework for enterprise risk management, and there are no formalized citywide structure to identify, assess, manage, and monitor risk at an enterprise level. Normally in an organization, there is going to be audit that acts as an independent and objective service to look at these things. And there is a sister to that in the administration or in management that establishes internal controls. It holds units, divisions, departments, individuals accountable for failures of following internal controls, and it works closely with audit. It's a collaborative effort. The internal control environment in the city of Minneapolis is inconsistent across all departments. There's insufficient formalization to documentation and monitoring of key controls. I won't go so far to say that the tone at the top is lacking. I do think that the city council is making strides and showing leadership with tone at the top, as we'll get into when we talk about some investments in the office of the city auditor. And I do think that there's been some movement within the administration and acknowledgement of these enterprise risk management shortfallings. There's been some trainings that have been developed and some work that is in progress. So I do want to recognize that there is broad understanding of some of these shortcomings, and now it's moving to the next step on how do we address them. So as far as recommendations, one of the things that I think City Council can do, and I'll step back just for 1 second. The Audit Committee currently receives and files almost everything that comes from my office. One thing I want to look at going forward is maybe another mechanism for moving some of these things forward to another City Council committee or to the City Council body as a whole. And so, although that's not in place right now, this is a receive and file type of presentation. But these recommendations are the type of thing that should be elevated then to the committee of the whole, to another City Council committee. And so I'll work with President Payne and Vice President Chugtai on moving these forward. But the recommendation here to address enterprise risk management is adopting what is colloquially known as the Green Book. This is the Standards for Internal Control in the Federal Government. This is a book put out by the USGAO, and it is the companion for what is known as the Yellow Book, Government Auditing Standards. When the City Council recently made some adjustments to the Auditor's office, we added that in addition to IIA Red Book standards, that we are going to also use government auditing standards. These are more specific to the work that we do. In my opinion, the IIA Red Book standards are great, they're robust, but they are written for the private sector and we're kind of a footnote. So these go along together because the Yellow Book basically audits the internal controls of the Green Book. So if we're able to formally adopt the Green Book, and I will share, the state government has done this. They have adopted the U.S. government's internal controls, and I think the city should do the same. I think that will help with some of the things that I'm talking about. Another recommendation is to work on an ordinance, and with this one I suggest it's worked on collaboratively with the administration to develop and identify a way to maintain an ERM framework. This office has recommended with our risk assessment 3 years in a row now that the city look into an ERM executive officer or assign the functions of an ERM officer to existing leadership. When we talk about tone at the top, it needs to be at the top. It needs to be at the maybe the DCOO level. And that is the level of importance that internal controls play in a government organization this size. With this ordinance, it should look at assigning key department personnel to participate. Again, we're in a siloed environment. We need to break that down through governance. And then this group should also report governance and ERM updates to the council and the audit committee. Finally, they would integrate ERM discussions into strategic planning, operational decision-making, and the city's annual budget process. Second priority, we just heard about it with the helix contract. In the last 3 months, we have also looked at 3 contracts from NSD that had similar problems. And it is abundantly clear that the contract oversight across different departments within the city is lacking. Again, I want to give credit where credit's due. The city attorney's office is working or has created training to help folks within the administration understand how to oversee a contract. But I will share, one of the failings is the same as the Feeding Our Future scandal, and that is nobody does site visits. If we go out on site and we see that this contractor is being paid $1 million to do what they have agreed to do, and there's no activity happening, we need to address that early, not wait for audit to come look at it after the fact. So again, I say that a bit sternly here, but we have to improve our contract oversight in the city. And Audit is willing to help with that from an advisory service. So that city attorney's training, we weighed in on that. We made sure that there was information related to internal controls, good governance, good oversight. And so again, you'll see a theme that the office is really trying to act in an advisory services role with some of these things. As I mentioned, there is a bit of a recurring issue with contracts or grantees that are propped up by executive leadership or by individual city council members. This is not an activity that is sustainable. It is very risky. We need to be aware of that. That said, there are going to be instances like Helix where we need an immediate response. So we need to have policies and procedures in place as a city to say, okay, this can move forward because it checks all of the boxes. Or, I'm sorry, this is not going to move forward. And like you said, Chair Payne, that gives the staff some leverage to be able to say, you know what, we've all agreed to this policy. We're not going to do this. All right, so clearly the ongoing media coverage, the public inquiries, questions from other oversight bodies, including county auditor, the federal attorney's office. I mean, we're getting questions from all sorts of angles on some of these contracts. That is not something that is helping rebuild trust in the city. And when I took on this job, I think one of the most important things that I committed to was helping rebuild trust. So I'm going to point out some of these difficult things. We're going to escalate them to the council. We're going to talk about them, but we have to address them to help rebuild public trust. So the recommendations that I have related to this are coming up with a way to prohibit the advancement of named contracts off of the council floor without full comprehensive staff review, including the Finance and Property Services Department, the City Attorney's Office, responsible operational departments, and I shouldn't say just the council floor, because that's also like we saw within the administration and just happening operationally. So we need to see that the existing policies are updated to help with that. And then training contract managers. Like I say, this is ongoing, but we need to monitor contract manager performance to ensure that provisions are followed. When we're getting bills for $800 at the grocery store for an NSD contract, that might make sense. Maybe this contractor is helping families through food insecurity. But when all we're getting is a receipt for Cub and their contract says you need to identify which families you serviced, you need to identify what dates you service, and we're getting none of that detail, that comes down to contract manager training and contract manager oversight of the contract, but also oversight of the contract manager themselves. All right, so I will pause because that brings us to the next agenda item. So if there's any questions on that, I would be happy to take them.
Member Thompson.
Sorry, I have no questions. I just wanted to, thank you, Chair Payne. I just wanted to thank you for that work.
Yes.
Because it shines a light on a lot of things. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just going to mention, I think it's really wise to put more controls in, especially coming from elected members. I think there's an inherent power dynamic when any elected member is making a request. And I'm wondering if we could add some detail as well, because this came up during the NSD contracts, which did go through a formal RFP process, a blind RFP process, best practice. But even still, as it came to a decision on city council, the contracts weren't finalized yet, and I'll even connect this to the Helix contract, because I remembered voting for that, and I remember going, yeah, there's a real urgent need here, but it was hard to tell, did Helix go through a formal process or not? Did NSD go through a formal process or not? And it's like those details emerge through discourse, rather than are highlighted with bright signals in the RCA saying this is a single source caution versus this is a, double-blind RFP, it's been through this process. I don't think there's any consistency in how those actions are brought forward to City Council, and I think that as part of outlining a new policy or procedure in this space, there should definitely be more proactive transparency when it comes to those types of ways that we arrive at a vote.
Yeah, Chair Payne, I think that's a great point, and I think that having an executive ERM manager in place can help build and hold people accountable for that, what is getting put into the RCAs. But also having that, it gives you that leadership at the highest level that is overseeing this process to make it consistent. So health is doing the same thing that NSD is. And NSD is doing, frankly, the same thing that the police department is, because we need to look at all of our departments from the perspective that they follow good internal control, they have good governance, and we're just not seeing that right now. So, I mean, there are good things happening across different departments. Again, at NSD, with some of their contracts, they've got some folks in place now that are bringing things to us. They're saying, this doesn't look good. So I think there's some changes moving in the right direction. But to your point, yes, I think there needs to be that level of oversight.
Member Hasbeen.
Thank you, Chair Payne. And yes, thank you for this. And I just definitely felt the ERM piece. I think we've been up here, 2 years in, and I think every single report that we see is, okay, what's that ownership going to look like on that department? And some departments, here's who's going to be in control, here's who's going to do this, here's going to do this, and it's very well outlined of how they're going to maintain that level. And then other times it's, oh, well, audit will come back in 3 years or something like that. So I really appreciate that. I think I look forward to more conversations on this. And I do think that dynamic between elected versus professional staff, I see absolutely the need. I also see sometimes the city staff waiting till someone else is in office potential. And I think there's kind of a balance, and I've heard things said even in very formal settings about, oh, we'll just wait out this term, or we'll wait out till the next folks. So I think there's and I'm sitting here kind of as a community member on this panel of ensuring the processes also have required timelines and kind of ownership to the city. And I think unfortunately sometimes we're reliant on our elected officials to keep pushing that, because we're not seeing that that just attention to those priorities. So completely, I'm a policy geek, so yes, please, but how do we make sure the two live up to that need for the city?
Yeah, totally understood. Chair Payne and Audit Committee, I think that is exactly what I want to do going forward. I want to update some of our templates so that from the audit perspective, when we are seeking management response, we are getting consistent response. We cannot tell management how to respond. They might be snarky, they might be very professional. I mean, I've seen it all, but if they ask, I will certainly explain to them what a good response looks like. But through our templates, we can certainly ask them, who are you assigning this to? What is your corrective action, and when do you think this will be done? That said, they may not provide that, but if we provide them that template, I think we'll be more consistent in getting that.
My last thought too is, how do we close that feedback loop? In my time on audit, and I started on audit in my first term, and then I rolled off under the new government structure, and then I came back on as chair this term. I've seen a number of audits that have highlighted, anything from something minor to something egregious, and I've never really seen a connection point to consequences, right? And it's like, you can see a management response, and sometimes the response is, again, very professional, and you see those responses get resolved. We just saw a number of issues get resolved today for the property and evidence audit, but when there is no adequate management response, or the issues hang there unresolved, I haven't seen consequences one way or the other. And I'm wondering how we can create more consequences and accountability when it comes to identifying some of these control problems, these risk problems.
Yeah, Chair Payne, I think that with an enterprise executive that is responsible for this, we certainly put an individual in that role where they are held responsible for these types of activities. If there is an audit and that audit has recommendations, ultimately they're responsible for the corrective actions. They're going to delegate responsibility to the departments, but it's their job, their staff's job, their purview then to make sure those are being followed up on. I don't know that that's happening in the organization. Audit, frankly, if you're considering the yellow book and the green book, audit's role is not to monitor. We do a lot of monitoring. You saw it this morning. We bring in, folks that still have some audit findings to clean up. And that's fine. We'll always do that because we want to make sure that these things are being taken care of. But because there's not this enterprise risk management structure, the Green Book talks about there needs to be, on the management side, this level of oversight. So I would say that, through developing an executive type function or assigning those types of responsibilities to an existing executive, that can come through collaboration with the administration, and we can look to build out some of those responsibilities because you're exactly right. I mean, if there's not accountability other than dragging them in front of the audit committee, which may or may not be seen by people that it needs to be seen by, or fighting about it in the public, I think there needs to be some mechanism for accountability.
Agreed. All right, seeing no questions or comments, I will direct the clerk to file that report. And next, we have item 6, which is an update on the Office of City Auditor structure and future plans. And you are back on.
All right, thank you. So that all leads into some of the needs that the Office of City Auditor has. In the 3 months that I've been here, I've learned a lot. And one of the things that I've learned is that before the government restructuring, there was no Office of City Auditor. There was an internal audit function. There were a few people in that role, but it did not look at all like some of the counterparts across the country when you consider municipal government oversight. Currently, after PAR and O&E have moved out, we are at 6 auditors with Director Pudyal in the internal audit director role and myself in the city auditor role. And all of the things we've talked about today, including in my presentation, these are not assurance services. These are not things that come off of our annual audit plan that we present each year. When you look at the IIA audit standards, the 2 functions of an audit shop and a chief audit executive are to provide assurance services and advisory services. We need resources to do these after-action reviews and to do some of the things that come directly from the council or from the administration. And this is just highlighting, I will get the slides into the agenda after the fact, so this is just highlighting some information you already know, what my responsibilities are, what the current structure looks like. But what I'm looking at is creating a new division that can focus on the advisory services. I think that the original intent of the O&E division was good, but it did not focus in on what could be done independently of city council or administration being too involved in the work. So what we can do is a more deliberate plan for program evaluations that will go through the same process as our annual risk-based audit plan. As I alluded to earlier, we would poll audit committee members, we would poll city council members, and we would get an idea of what programs they wanted evaluated. And we would come back, these are lengthy reviews, we would come back with information and recommendations. This is analogous with what happens at the Legislative Auditor's Office in their Program Evaluations Division, and it provides really great insight. But the beauty of it is we can, because we're the auditor, we can make recommendations. And so I think that meets that original intent. And then we need to talk about the community safety audits, the after-action reviews, the ad hoc advisory services from both the council and the administration. These are all things that I don't want to say no to. I've told many people that if I don't have to say no because of resources, that is my preference. So we're gonna be asking for some additional resources. This afternoon at the Budget Committee, we'll be requesting 4 FTEs for starting to build out this new division, and then we will be, with the 2026 budget, requesting 3 additional FTEs. So that would bring our total group to 15, which would then be in line with some of the lowest audit staffs and OIG staffs at comparable cities. So it would get us more in line with what others have. So this just kind of looks at what I talked about there. 3 internal auditors for the new division, 2 would be this year, 1 would be next year. Sorry, I don't know. Quality training manager, this is a required work that we need a position for. The Red Book and the Yellow Book both in the last year underwent changes that significantly increased the quality assurance that we need to do on our own work. So this is a vital position. And then we are now at a point where, because of a lot of the new advisory services that we're taking on are coming up, we need the support of an admin assistant. This is something we've requested in the past as well. The director of the new division, and then hopefully, but last, is the deputy city auditor. The ordinance does allow for me to appoint a deputy city auditor with approval of the audit committee, and this is something that I'll be requesting. Director Pujol and I, along with the new quality manager and the new director of the advisory services division, will kind of keep things rolling, but as we do grow out these functions, having the additional administrative support will be incredibly helpful. So visually, just what I talked about, and that is the extent. If you're interested, like I said, this afternoon at the Budget Committee, I will be presenting a little bit more broadly. There will be dollars talked about, but that is the idea, and my hope is that you kind of see the vision there.
Any questions or comments? Member Hosbin.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I would just say, in terms of advocacy and what the committee can do, please keep us, or keep me, and I don't know about others, in the loop there. I know that's a multi-stage, and asking for headcount is hard.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Vice Chair Singleton.
Yeah, I'll just say generally thank you for both this report and the previous report. I think it's really great to see some of the structural changes that you envision and having the internal capacity to support those structural changes in both like the management side and within the auditor's office. So thank you for all that work and that vision.
All right. Well, seeing no further questions or comments from members, I will direct the clerk to receive and file that report. And our last new business item is the consideration of 3 amendments to the 2025 Enterprise Risk Assessment and Risk-Based Integrated Audit Plan. And I will again invite Auditor Timmerman.
All right, thank you. So I guess I'm calling myself a liar, maybe 12:30. We're gonna fly though. All right, so thank you, Chair Payne, thank you, Audit Committee. The audit plan needs to be updated because of a few additions that we've seen over the last few months. The first is one that you're very familiar with, that is the after-action review involving the death of Allison Lucier. We are working diligently on this, and we have not only been working on this, but we've also been working on the interactions leading up to and after the Davis Maturi shooting. Those are both combined in an RFP to bring in a law firm consultant to help with the policy and procedure review, help develop recommendations. We've met with families of Allison Lucier, we've met with Davis Maturi, we've met with advocates for the American Indian community. We have really started diving into these reviews. And unfortunately, I was hoping we'd have the contract signed by today so I could share with you who the contractor is, but I am very pleased with everything that ended up happening. We put the RFP out once and had one respondent that just was not workable, and we put it out again, and we had a respondent that I think is going to be a good partner in this review. We're still looking to have their work wrapped up by December, and that would mean we will either issue a report to the audit committee or a different council committee with an invitation to audit committee members either in January or February. So we'll keep you updated on logistics there. The other item we need to add to the audit plan is a review for ShotSpotter. This, again, is going to be an advisory service. The City Council had made a request to the Legislative Department and a separate request to the administration related to ShotSpotter. We are going to handle this collaboratively with the Department of Public Safety. Commissioner Barnett and I have talked. We will lead this. This will be an independent review, but we will collaborate with them because they have insight into all things ShotSpotter. And so it will end up looking like a normal special review, but I am excited to team up with them, at least on paper, because I think that is what we need to start doing, is really showing audit as a partner to others within the enterprise. And then the last one, the MDHR settlement agreement asked for an audit of misconduct complaint intake. So basically auditing OPCR's work. And that is something that we can do our part to help with one of the many items in that settlement agreement. We don't exactly know the timing of that. It is meant to be a regular, recurring type of audit. We'll probably do our first one starting in the winter, and then we'll look at it every 2 years. There's no prescribed timing of this in the settlement agreement, but I do think it is something that we'll be able to develop. This first year will take a little longer because it's the first time, but then it'll be really the same review every 2 years or so. So this one, I believe that is it for that. If there's questions on those, I'm happy to answer them, but I think that is pretty straightforward.
I'll just add that, well, I appreciate all of this work. I mean, I think your first 3 months have been very intense. And just to see how you've been able to come into this institution and really strengthen, I feel like, we had a really strong foundation of audit, and seeing under this new government structure how the role of the city auditor versus an internal auditor, I think you've really been demonstrating how important that is for this institution. And I'll even highlight some of the conversations I've been having both with you, the city attorney, around the developments around the federal consent decree with the Trump administration withdrawing that. And, you know, we hear from the mayor a commitment to still deliver on the provisions in the consent decree. However, the point of a consent decree isn't just to have a roadmap for reform, it's also to have an independent evaluation and oversight of verifying those reforms. And I think that in the absence of a formal consent decree, I do envision the role of the independent auditor to fill in that gap, and that's still TBD on how that might function, and I think it's a reflection of the real need that we do have in building up our capacity in the city auditor's office and just across the enterprise around controls. And I think I also want to thank Mr. Pujal for your leadership in the time prior to you getting here. I think some of the observations that you highlighted today are things I shared with you that were highlighted by Mr. Pujal that I felt resonated, and I think that we're really starting to demonstrate a strength in the audit function here, and so I'm just really grateful for your leadership.
Chair Payne, if I could, I want to share that gratitude. Director Pujal and I have established a very strong working relationship and a good partnership. I think that the work of internal audit has continued to move forward even with these additional demands. And that is a testament to his organization and making sure that the audit process is rigorous and sound. So thank you.
Seeing no further questions or discussion, I will move to approve those amendments to the 2025 Risk-Based Integrated Audit Plan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. That carries. And last is a report of the city auditor. Do we still want to run through that? All right. I'll invite Mr. Pujal, Director of Internal Audit, to give that report.
It's totally up to you, Chair, based on time, but we can try to be quick here.
No, good afternoon,
Yes.
Chair Payne and the members of the Audit Committee. I'd like to quickly provide you an update on all the projects that we have been working on. And first of all, thank you, City Auditor Timmerman and Chair Payne for talking glowing words about me. And I want to do the same thing for my audit staff as well. I mean, I can do my job like trying to manage and organize, but without their support and hard work, I mean, it's not possible. So I just wanted to thank my staff for working hard for the office and for the city. So, so total audit-wise, so we have total 8 projects that have been going on. A couple of them are on hold based on the capacity that we have, because we did prioritize some of the new audit that we'll be performing. So when you're trying to take on additional work, you have to at least put hold on a couple of them. So at least for now, there are like 6 audit projects in progress, and 4 of them are new from the last time we had this meeting back in February 2025. So again, the first one is the neighborhood safety contract management audit. So basically, the objective of that audit is to review the neighborhood safety contract processes, including the processes such as administration, management, reporting, oversight, and monitoring, to ensure that controls are established and operating effectively. So in this department, we have a new director, so Amanda Harrington, and we've been working with her and her staff to get to make progress on this audit. So right now we're in the field work phase of the audit. So the next one is the third-party software systems use and control consultation. So this is like an advisory review as well. So the objective of this review is to review processes and controls related to departments' use of third-party software and application. And we have an IT auditor in our team who has been performing this audit, and so this is in the reporting phase. So basically, we have initially preliminary highlighted some of the gaps that we can work on. So we're just working on with management to do the issue vetting and ultimately in the drafting the report. So that's why we're in the status of reporting right now. So the next one is the Minneapolis Park and Recreational Board Revenue and Collection Audit. So this is the phase 2 of the audit, and the objective of this audit is to to review design and effectiveness of the controls around park board revenue and collection processes. So the phase one, we completed it back in 2023, which focused on the city of Minneapolis. So as a part of the phase two, we're focusing on the revenue and collection process for the park board, and this is in this still in the planning phase. So the next one is MPD body-worn camera and automated license plate reader audit. So this audit, we have to perform every 2 years based on the state statute. So the objective of these two audits are to test the Minneapolis Police Department's compliance with the state law regarding the body-worn cameras and automated license plate reader. So this is one of the newer audits that we started since our last audit committee meeting, and we're still in the planning phase of this audit. So the next one is one of the action after reviews case involving Davis Maturi and John Sawchak. So the objective of this after action review is to conduct a review of the case involving Davis Maturi and John Sawchak, and still in progress. So we're in the information collection phase. So once we get that contract signed, then and we bring in the independent evaluator as well. So we'll begin our regular planning process, but at this time we have been gathering some of the information related to the case. And same with this after action review case involving death of Allison Lucier as well. We are in the information collection phase right now, and we'll start this audit moving forward once we finalize that contract with the external independent evaluator. So the next two audits are on hold. So the first one is the ancillary police program audit. So the objective was to review the process and controls around the ancillary police programs to ensure the adequate controls are in place and the programs are operating effectively and intended. So initially we had that planning meeting with the MPD, and based on our discussions, probably we need to do a little bit of further analysis to regarding what exactly we will be looking at from scope standpoint. So that's why for now we have put this on hold. And same with the facilities management audit as well. Basically, both from management side and the audit side, like there was a turnover, so which was very difficult for us to understand the entire process again. So we have put that on hold for now to decide whether we want to do this audit again with a fresh lens and identify if we need to add or remove some of the scope as well. So that's why we have put this audit on hold as well. Any questions before I move to the next section? Go ahead. All right. No, thank you. So from the fraud, waste, and abuse investigation standpoint, we have two active open investigations that are going on right now. And I know in terms of the prior audit issues follow-up, we had a request from audit committee back in February to maybe provide a little bit detailed information regarding some of these closed issue. And I had a chance to talk to City Auditor Timmerman as well for some of these like older issues. What should we do? Because they have been as a part like open issue items. Some of them are from 2018, right, and which has been more than 7 years. So we have made some of those decisions as well. So that's what I'm going to present. So from a statistics standpoint, we have 16 open issues right now and 19 overdue, and that is, they have already been extending the tentative completion date. And there are like 8 audit issues that are validation in progress, which means the management has already submitted the work that they have performed to remediate some of these issues, and audit is reviewing them right now. And for this audit committee, audit has closed 10 issues that were outstanding. All right, so regarding details of some of the closed issues, so the first one is there were 3 issues remaining from the 2018 Police Information Management System, PIMS, security technology audit. And for this one, even though we didn't validate whether those were remediated or not, because since there was change in the management from their side as well, and we do have the follow-up audit in our audit plan, we have decided that probably we'll close this issue for now, but when we perform that follow-up audit, we'll make sure what's the status of some of these open issues and see whether there has been any improvement made or not. And these 3 issues were non-public issues, so we didn't identify what exactly those issues are over here. So the next one is the 2022 hiring and promotion process audit. So for that one, we closed the issue number 8, former employee back pay. So for now, there are now like 4 open issues for this report. So there are still 4 remaining. Third one is the 2023 sexual assault examination kit special project follow-up audit. And for this one, we closed the issue number 3, restricted kit conversion, and we still have 2 non-public audit issues remaining, which management came today and presented in those 2 issues. And for the 2023 property and evidence audit, so there was one issue that was closed regarding the destruction processes. So they have completed or created the policy and procedures regarding the destruction process, and there are now 7 audit issues remaining for this report, which management came and presented as well. Regarding the 2023 P-card program spending audit, we have closed 4 issues for like training, documentation, and record keeping, sales and use tax, as well as a user termination, transfer, cancellation. So right now, there are only 3 issues remaining from this audit. And so these are some of these open issues that we have highlighted, because in the past we just used to include the audit name, but we have also included the audit name and also the title, issue rating, and whether they have been what phase, whether it's open, overdue, or validation in progress. So the next few slides are based on all those detailed information. So regarding some of these like open issues, so the first one is related to the 2019 police off-duty work, and there are 3 open issues right now. The first one is the technology enhancement, policy requirements, and oversight and monitoring. So the first one regarding the technology enhancement, when we performed that audit back in 2019, the system was already kind of old. So right now, based on our discussion with the management, they are working on replacing that IT system called Workforce Director to make sure to track some of the off-duty hours. So that's in the works. And for the issue number 2, some of these policies are also covered as a part of the consent decree. So they have to they will be working on some of those policy reforms as well. And the third one is regarding the oversight and the monitoring. So MPD has created the inspection unit, which is responsible to provide some oversight work as well. So they have been working on creating some of these, working on some of these open issues. But one of the things is like there has been changes in the leadership in this division as well. So sometimes it's hard whenever there is turnover. So we'll be working with the management, and also when we completed the annual audit plan, we put police off-duty work audit as one of the to be performed in future as well. It's not technically in the audit plan, but we have been thinking about putting that as a part of the follow-up audit as well, so that we can look at some of these issues which has not been completed. So the next one is the 2021 personal work issues, mobile device policies and controls audit. So So this audit has 5 open issues. So if you look at them, basically they're all intertwined with each other. So based on our conversation with the management, they have already drafted the policy, but it has not been like finalized because I think they're also working on employee acknowledgement whenever there is a change in policies as well. So once it has been finalized and published in the public setting, then we will be able to perform and validate issue 2 to 5 as well. So the main one we're right now waiting for is to finalize this policy and procedures, and it should be done in near future. And for the 22 hiring and promotion audit, so we have 4 open issues, and basically besides the issue number 5, which requires funding and approval from the city council or budget committee as well, rest 12, 13, and 16, management is working to complete that in coming few months. And the next one is the 2023 revenue collection phase 1. We have 5 open issues right now. For issues 1, 2, 3, and 5, they have been partially remediated, but right now the city is going through the annual financial audit, which concludes in July. So management said that they can focus more time to complete some of these issues after July. So. And the 2023 sexual assault exam kit special project follow-up, we just had the management present the status this morning. And the same with the 2023 property and evidence audit as well. For the 2023 P-card spending audit, we have 3 outstanding issues, but they still have some time to complete some of these issues, so we'll provide more updates during the next audit committee meeting. And for the 2024 MPD fleet management audit, there are 10 open issues they're still working on. And especially for the issue number 4, driver license program, basically they have contacted all the staff and officers to provide their eligibility on the driver license information so that they can complete this issue as well. So they have been working on completing this audit issue. Hopefully we'll provide more update in the next audit committee for this one. And for the NCR city funding to neighborhood organizational audit, we have 4 open issues, and if you look at the dates, there still have time besides one, but we'll follow up on that one and present in August audit committee meeting. So these are a list of all the reports with the non-closed audit issues. And at this time, I'd like to present City Auditor Timmerman to go through the next slide. Thank you. Any questions before?
Member Hosbein?
Just 2 quick points. I know we're running time. Thank you so much for this detail. This is hugely helpful. I finally think I understand what I'm supposed to be looking for, so thank you. I see that you have the MPD fleet management audit on the next committee member or the committee meeting agenda.
Yes.
I feel like if memory serves, we were waiting for actually some additional data from that team as well from our previous review when they were here. I can look up too, but I would just love if we could have any resolution on some of those outstanding numbers.
Yep, we have been working with the management to get some of those information,
Perfect.
so we'll follow up with them again.
Amazing, thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. Timmerman?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Payne, Audit Committee. The last item is that we are looking forward to a training session on July 28th. You should have all received invitations for that. We are looking to hold that at a space to be determined, but it will focus on independence, objectivity, audit standards, the working relationship between the committee and the Office of City Auditor and the City Council and the dynamics of that. So we have been working hard on putting together that training, so we're looking forward to that, and we're hoping it to be a bit more of a casual environment as well. So come, wear jeans, bring your coffee, we'll just hang out for a few hours. So, all right, that's all.
All right. Thank you. Action-packed day, and I think with that, I will ask the clerk to receive and file that report. And seeing no further business before us, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.